What I wanted to start with was just hearing about your childhood.
Childhood?
Yeah. Like, what's your earliest memory of childhood?
Too bad we aren't talking to Dorothy, who could remember, or Nancy, who can remember before she was born. I've tried sometimes to think of my earliest memory. I think my earliest memory is of, for some reason, of a front porch in Birmingham, Alabama, when I must have been about maybe 4 or 5 years old. But that's all. And I can remember when, by the time I got into school, and the hillside that we lived on, and I can remember the first Catholics we ever saw, first Catholic family. We heard that the Catholic family was moving into the neighborhood. People, when the vans moved up with their furniture, people were there watching all around. Just made it a point to be coming by to see what they looked like. Turned out they had 2 little boys named Tommy and Poogie Lovell that were just like us. And their mom's cookies were as good as anybody's, and so forth. And then we had a Jewish family that lived just one house down from us. His name was Red Fox, was the boy's name, and he was quite a good one. So in Birmingham, Alabama, in those days, at least in our neighborhood, there was white Anglo-Saxon stuff all the way. Childhood memories are in school. I always did well. I made all E's, that was for excellent, and 2 P's on every report card. 1 for conduct and 1 for writing. And I suppose I would still get graded just that way at this age in life. At one point, because I was, quote, a smart child, and I skipped a couple of grades, they sent me out to what they called a special class, all the way across town. Had to ride and make 2 changes on streetcars and get there. Turned out it was at a school called Minor School in Hensley, and I didn't know it, of course, until later that Dorothy was in that school. And didn't get to meet her at that time. About the only things I can remember about school are the times we played stuff. Out on the playground, playing baseball, or running, or doing all kinds of stuff like that. And in fact, all through high school and college, and all the rest of my life, about the only things I can remember playing. It's been a wonderful life.
Now, George, when you say you got poor in conduct, what kinds of things would give you a poor rating for
Well,
conduct?
I was probably inclined to smart off and talk a lot and stuff like that.
Class clown type of
I
stuff?
usually got along with everybody. There was one boy, he and I, we often had fights after school. In the grade schools in Birmingham, anyway, kids would like to egg on the different people. And the word would go around, George is going to meet Roy out at the flagpole. That meant right after school, at the flagpole in front, we'd go out there and we'd have a fight. And they'd all get in the ring around us, and he and I would punch each other and beat each other. So later on in late high school, when we were playing on teams together, we became good friends. But for some reason, he and I didn't have to fight many people, because there was a big boy named Everett Harwell, who was quite a bit bigger and stronger than anybody else. And Everett Harwell was not the brightest boy in the world, So I would help him with his arithmetic and other things, and consequently he let it be known that I was not to be badgered or poked at and stuff like that. If we played marbles on the school grounds or at a local tennis court where there was a good place to shoot, Everett would walk across with a hole in his shoe and step on the marble and just suck it up and go on across, and everybody knew who took the marble, but everybody'd go looking for the marble. Wonder where that marble went. Everett had the marble in his shoe. Yeah. So later on in high school we became good friends. No.
What were the studies like? I mean, when you went to the special school.
It wasn't any different. It was just that I can remember, probably like the kids nowadays take advanced math or this or that right in the school. That was probably the kind of thing it went.
Okay.
Only went 1 year because my mother didn't like the idea of my going across town like that. I didn't like that idea either because I spent too much time that way, riding on that stupid streetcar.
Did it, Birmingham have a streetcar system everywhere?
Everywhere.
And what was that like? How does it compare to? I mean,
Well, it was good. I mean, down there, any kind of main street, anywhere from north to south, east to west, there were streetcar tracks, you know, right out in the middle of the, just like railroad tracks, right out in the middle of the street. And about every 15 minutes or so, depending on the schedule, you know, you get at any corner and just wait for the streetcar and go. And if you were like going from Norwood on one side of town to Inslee Highlands on the other where Dorothy lived, you get down in the middle of town and of course change, you get a transfer. You got a transfer, it costs 7 cents. Otherwise it costs a nickel to ride the streetcar, ride them anywhere. Some of my most pleasant moments are remembering at times, particularly college age, of riding. I always made it a point to get near the back of the streetcar because that's where all the black people had to sit. And that's where all the interesting conversations went along. Remember one time the back doors of the streetcar opened up and you could get on front or back, and everybody just talking in the back of the car, and all of a sudden it got quiet because here, coming up the steps, was a young black man in a zoot suit. He was resplendent, had a chain hanging down and all that, you know, had his hat on and wide shoulders on his coat, and he got up and he didn't sit down, he just stood there for a minute. And everybody admired him. Finally somebody said, "How you doing, Slick?" He said, "Slick?" As if he didn't know what they were. And then everybody went right back to talking. They're just a lot of snapshot memories like that of riding those streetcars. At Halloween time, of course, streetcars became a target. You could make up, if you rolled up film and then put paper around it and lit one end of it, and that just made a terrible stink. And so when the streetcar would stop, we'd throw that in the window and run. Or it was quite a deal to try to catch on to the trolley and pull the trolley off, so the streetcar man had to get out and put the trolley back on to get the thing going again.
What was the trolley? How did that work?
Well, there was a wire overhead, and it would, at least a part of them, and you'd have a thing sticking up with a little roller that went around. Yeah, those were.
And would you do that by throwing stuff at it or hooking it?
You got to get up there and do it. And of course you put pennies on the streetcar track, you know, to get them flattened out. Same with railroads that came through. I remember one time thinking that I would spit down the smokestack of it, right down the smokestack of a train that came by. These big old cold burning trains, you know. And so as I'm ready at the viaduct when it's coming under the bridge, and of course you know what happened. Now I know what happens. My eyebrows were singed off. I had soot in my face for a long time. So I learned, but I was always a slow learner in that case. School was always easy. It never was any problem, you know, getting because I could remember things quickly. I could forget them quickly too. Some people take a long time to learn something, and then they remember it forever, and I'm just the opposite.
What memories do you have of your parents? Like earliest memories of your dad?
Well, my dad had a rough time in a way all of his life. He contracted malaria down either in South America or Mexico as a young man. He had recurring bouts with that. In World War I, he had been hit 2 weeks before the armistice in the right leg, and his ankle was a big mass, still almost like a big scar, almost open. Still had shrapnel in his leg. And so if he had to walk a lot, that would swell. And he was gassed at the Second Battle of Ypres when the Germans first used gas. And so he carried traces of that. So I remember my dad as a person who never complained about any of that. But who during the days of depression when he had lost his business would be walking looking for work. He'd come home, that ankle would be swelled up like a ham almost. Yeah, he was, everybody calls him Mr. Harper. Even people that worked with him, you know. Maybe his bosses in some cases, but they called him Mr. Harper. He was that kind of a person. And he worked, and had to work, I guess, for our family all of his life. He never had time off, for example, to go watch me play ball. I do remember 3 or 4 times when he took me to see the Birmingham Barons play baseball, and those were big events in my life. One time I had a choice of going to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and Jane took that choice with mother and aunt for some reason, on a big trip that would have been, or getting to go to the swimming pool with my dad for what afternoon, and I took that. Mother was a disciplinarian. There was a bush right near the corner of our house that never had long switches on it because my mother, as she rounded the bush, would break off one to use on me if she could catch me. But my father never laid a hand on me. I would do I didn't mind tricking my mother or doing something that mother didn't want to do. I never did anything that I willingly, that I know of, that my father didn't want me to do. And so I figured that was the way to be. And that's the way I was with our kids. I was an easy mark, in a sense, but my dad was just a wonderful fellow. When the Depression hit, he was in a company called Dixie Metal Products Company, and in partnership with 2 or 3 other men. They went bankrupt, and he would not take bankruptcy. He paid off debts for that company little by little until 1955, I think he finally paid off. Yeah, from 29 or 30 on. You know, if you owed a debt, you owed it. So we didn't have anything. Birmingham, it's impossible for people to think about what that depression was like. Along the railroads, the boxcars were all stripped. People, you know, getting wood for something. And I can remember as a little boy, it was kind of embarrassing to go along the railroad track and try to find any coal, pieces of coal that had fallen off. And long lines of people downtown, in soup lines, waiting to get something to eat. People everywhere just looking for a job. We didn't have much money, or any particularly, but anytime we could have a loaf of bread and peanut butter, we had Jane and I always called it hobo butter, because that was if anybody came by, and our house was marked usually, then Mama gave them a peanut butter sandwich. And so we moved out into the country, into East Alabama. And that's some of my real experiences as a child out there. We lived in a little house that wasn't as big as this room. Cracks, you could look outside. No insulation, that kind of stuff. It's just a shack, really. There was a well nearby. Any bathing that was done, as Jimmy Dickens sings, in the galvanized washing tub. On Saturday night, we had a number 2 galvanized washing tub. And once every week, Mama made us take a bath anyway. And that, we lived there, fortunately not through a winter, but through a summer. Then we moved into a place where we had one room, something like this one, in a house with some other people, and had 2 beds in it. Mom and Daddy and Jane and I in here, and had a fireplace, and hallway and a kitchen and a back porch, and then the other people lived in the room on the other side. And there we spent a couple of years, and they're working on the farm with these people, and in the wintertime cutting wood and stuff like that. I learned to work hard, and always enjoyed it as a child, working hard physically. And also we were so far away from school or anything else that in order to get anywhere, of course, we had to walk or run, which I always did. And it's 7 miles into Ashland in Clay County, Alabama, the county seat. The only pavement was around the county courthouse in Oak Square. People would get there on Saturday. Everybody went to town on Saturday. If you couldn't get a ride with a wagon or somebody going by, well, then you walked. And the traffic always went around the square this way. Everybody who was there, you'd walk. And you'd walk past these stores, and then down that side, and then this side, and then down this side. And if you had, depending on how much time you had, maybe walk around it 4, 5, 6 times. If you wanted to see anybody, just stop, because they'd come by. And just look at things, you know. Boy, I wish you could buy this or that. And they had a movie theater, and for a dime, you could go in, and they always had the cliffhanger serials on, where they would end up, you know, with the avalanche coming down about to kill the good guy. And that was a big deal. We put on your best clothes, whatever they were, and you go into town. Sometimes you wait around and another bunch of boys come by, didn't like your bunch, you could have a little altercation, something just for fun. Anyway, that was the county seat. There was a road from there to Talladega that was a highway, gravel. It was gravel, better than the other roads in the county. And our school was named after Cotton Tom Heflin, a big old U.S. senator. It's called Heflin Junior High. They were trying a junior high deal, and it was more of a modern school. Walls were plastered and everything. And that's where we went. It would, as I can remember, it probably 3 miles or so from where we lived, and that's where I learned how to play basketball. I'm rattling on now. I
Now,
can tell you.
George, is that where your basketball team won the?
That's right. We had a basketball team. We had 5, I started to say boys, men, who were young farmers. The oldest 27, the youngest was only 19. And they had to work, of course, all during the summer and into the fall. Only time they'd come to school would be like during the winter months. And Alabama schools during the Depression time often only went about 4 or 5 months anyway during the year. So they'd play basketball together, and they'd played together for years. And they were so good, they always beat any high school that would play them. And every year they'd try to get a game with Auburn University, and Auburn would never play them. This boy that was 27, and this man is 27, was a tall one. He was about 6'4", which was really tall in those days. And in those days, every time you had a jump ball, I still call it a jump ball, even though you take it out, they actually had a jump. And of course, he was so tall that he always got the jump. And if they jumped at the free throw line, he just usually put it in. If he didn't, one of the other boys put it in. So us little kids, just regular schoolers, we were, of course, the subs. And so when the grade school tournament one year came, the rule in Clay County, Alabama was that if you were over 21, you couldn't play in the grade school tournament. So we lost our team except for the one boy they called the kid, who was 19. And he and 4 of us little guys, we went down to a town called Millerville. We were seeded number 1, of course, so we went right into the quarterfinals. And we got beat, but our coach found out that they had an ineligible player. So we won that game on forfeit, and we went into the semifinals. And the team we were supposed to play had gone home the night before, but a big gully washing rain had come up and washed the bridge out, and they couldn't get there, so we were in the finals. So we didn't win it. They shot a basket right at the very end and beat us 69-13 or something like that. But my mother still was angry all of her life about the fact that that coach, we were riding in the car with the coach, let us out, let another boy and I out about 5 miles from home. Because we told him, we just get along. Middle of the night, dark as anything, and of course, we never thought anything about it, but she was thinking of 2 little kids running home, I got home and he wouldn't stay the rest of the night with us. He had another 3 miles to go out to where he lived, but he took off. That boy was the smartest boy I have ever known. Quick. One day he had some firecrackers, which he had illegally procured. And there was a knothole right by his desk. And he lit one and dropped it down through the knothole, and it went off in the basement. Had 4 teachers in the school. They all went down the stairs to the basement. Couldn't find anything. Came back up. About an hour later, bang, another one went off down there. Tried the same thing. They couldn't find it. After lunch, he got a little bit too bold, and he decided he would light one and drop it through the hole. Well, it turned, and there it lay across the hole, and he's trying to kick it in when it went off. And he jumped up and said, "Teacher, whoever's shooting those firecrackers in the basement, just shove one up through this hole. I thought right then, now that boy, I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was president of something, somewhere. He was smart. I've always admired that kind of thinking ability. Well, we moved into town, didn't have enough school that year for it to really count, and the principal at Phillips High School told my mother I'd have to take the 8th grade over again. My mother didn't like that idea, and she had a friend a little higher up in the school administration, and so she got him to agree to take me on condition that if I did well, then I could stay in high school. Well, I did all right, and so that was that. Went to Phillips High School, big high school, about 1,500 in the senior class. Had about, I suppose, 4,500, 5,000 students. Downtown high school. Got into a lot of stuff there. Good stuff, but mostly the things I remember once again are playing ball and running. I got there and found out that in track all you had to do was run a mile. That was all right with me because we practiced track at Legion Field, which is about 2 miles from Phillips High, so I ran over there before the time to warm up each time. Just, you know, kind of like a guy eating a watermelon ahead of time. But I wasn't all that fast. I was just loping along. I didn't get faster until I made myself get faster at college age and in seminary. So, what? That's where I met my friend Ugg, that was Harold Howell, the only friend I still keep up with in Alabama. Called just the other day. He just turned 84. Called him Ugg because he's so ugly. We had another great friend that we called Hamburger Lewis because he was so full of scrap. And everybody had a nickname, of course. There was Egghead, Hancock, and because his head looked kind of like an egghead, not because he was so smart. And Ugg kind of took a liking to me in gym class. So he asked if I liked milk for my lunch, and I go, oh yeah, because we took our lunches. So he'd bring a quart of milk every day, which he would pick up off of a porch. They delivered milk, you know, in those days, and on his way there. But he came from a rough section of town. North Highlands and Birmingham was rough. I mean, of all the people that were in his class in grade school, by the time we were in college, he and I were in college, they had all either been in jail or were in jail or prison at that time. They were tough. He had 2 friends named Rat and Booger that we stopped by a filling station where they worked one night on our way home from college, and Rat had a gun, a pistol. And he said to Booger, you don't believe I'll shoot you, do you? And the Booger said, no, you won't. But Booger had enough sense to jump as he said it, and so Rat shot him in the leg. We had to take him to the hospital. I mean, these are rough boys. Rat and Booger and Ugg and I went out, we were swimming in somebody's car out in a rock quarry near Birmingham. And coming back, I was in the back seat with Rat, and I think Ugg was driving and Booger was up front. And Rat and I got to scuffling and wrestling in the back seat. And before long, I looked up and all 4 of us in the back seat. And just as I was about to say who's dropped, we ran into a tree. Those boys thought it was funny if you were out in this rock quarry, which didn't have any bottom to it, in that good, nice, clear water. They keep you out there by throwing rocks, you know, just to see how long it take before you drown, I guess, unless you wanted to take a chance of climbing up the hill with rocks coming at you. It's a rough group. And Ugg turned out to be just a real wonderful person, but he was tough as any of them. I wasn't ever that tough. I had to act tough sometimes, but I never was tough. In football, I much preferred to evade the tacklers or to throw it before they got there or something. But although there is a certain amount of fun, great fun in banging into people. Some of the things I can remember about our basketball team, particularly in college, were the free-for-alls that you'd have. Everybody just kind of wait for somebody to start something. And then everybody, both benches would empty and you'd get it there. And I still to this day like free-for-alls because nobody ever really gets hurt in them. You're in there so close, it's such a mass of people that you don't really have a chance to swing, and they just bang each other around and holler and all that. It's great.
And what college was that at?
Birmingham Southern College. Fine Methodist group.
Is it still Birmingham?
How did I get to Birmingham Southern? At the end of high school, and in high school I did well. I was valedictorian of the class and stuff like that. Just by not taking anything that took any smart to do. And so I got this appointment to West Point, and I was going to go there the following fall, but I went to a Methodist Youth Assembly in another part of Alabama. In fact, down at Montevallo, the school where Dorothy went, and at that time I had this big religious experience and decided that I should be a minister. So I went to Birmingham Southern College that fall, our Methodist school, instead, and that was that.
What was that experience? What happened with that?
Well, I don't know. I can remember at the end of every evening, the little sections of the dormitory where we were, a group of maybe 8, 10 boys and one. They always had a little prayer group before going to bed, and for whatever reason, and I really can't remember the details of it, we got really serious. The whole outfit. In fact, every boy who was in that group of 8 or 9 went into the Methodist ministry except one who became a doctor. And then we were just a little ragtag bunch of ordinary boys. I can remember going to my room and kneeling down by my bed and having a big emotional experience. I mean, I had a real born-again experience kind of a thing. And it was, because everything was different from then on. I never changed. Never looked back. I've never had any doubt, or never a time when I wished I'd gone into something else or done something else. I did quite a little cussing. Before that, a curse word never goes through my mind anymore unless it's with a joke or something. And hasn't since then. We got back home, and our pastor, Brother Pat, said, well, if you're going to be a minister, a preacher, you may as well start now. So he announced for 2 weeks later what they called a youth revival, and had these posters out. And I remember some blotters they had out with this youth preacher, 16 or whatever. Yeah, I guess I was 16, going to be the preacher. For 2 weeks, every night, I was supposed to preach. And I got up. Except one night, I did get a big fella who was an All-American, son of a Methodist preacher, an All-American at Vanderbilt in football, and he had decided he's going to be a preacher. So I invited him to preach one night, and he was shakier and worse than I was. First sermon I ever preached, I had it all memorized. It was going to be about 12 minutes long. But there was a fellow named K.T. Moore who'd holler amen every time he thought I said something was good. And K.T.'d holler amen and I'd forget a paragraph. So with a little prayer at the end, it lasted 7 minutes. I remember that. Of course, people, you know, compliment you and all that. And they did have some good singing along with it. And got through that. Then Brother Pat thought I was ready. This was still had some summertime left. So he was the head of the Board of Evangelism for the North Alabama Conference. He sent me out. The first place that I went to was a town called well, it wasn't a town, Westover, Alabama. And had a little bitty church there, a little frame church. And people to come in out of the gullies and stuff to come to church. First Sunday night, or the first night that we were there, we had about 8 to 10 people. And I didn't know anything to do except to try to go around the community and visit. And I'd pray about it. They put me to stay with a woman who they later agreed was crazy. And she was insane, I'm sure. And my room, where she had a bed, was in like a little lean-to against the house with a tin roof. And in a big tree right over it, chickens roosted. Well, if an owl or something else got in among those chickens at night, which they did, those chickens be dropping off that roof. Bang, bang, bang. So I didn't really get too much sleep, so I had to spend more time working on sermons and stuff. I had a little notebook, I'd write things in, and I had my Bible. But I don't know what happened there either. A bigger crowd the second night, bigger crowd the third night. By the end of the week, the church was full, people outside, particularly the men, looking in the windows and all. And we had about 40 or 50 people join the church. But what I liked best about that was that several years later, when I was with the National, after seminary, when I was with the National Conference of Methodist Youth, I went back into North Alabama to be a speaker and stuff like that. And the Conference Youth Council had 3 young people from that church, that little wide spot in the road in Alabama. So it was still going. It wasn't just a little flash in the pan deal. Oh, if you wanted to visit some homes, you walked up gullies, because that was the only way to get there. And if it was rainy, well, you just slogged in the mud and the rest of it. Here's something else. I ate supper with one family. The father was already sitting at the head of the table. Had mostly beans, and had the plates all around. And I started to eat beans with a fork. And he handed me, I can remember, he handed me a great big tablespoon and said, "Here, son, take something you can get at them with." So I took that spoon and ate beans. There was something. But wonderful people. When I got to Montana, I thought I'd find rural people like that. Of course, it didn't. Went to Geraldine, Montana, and I never did find any rural people. I mean, the people out there, almost all of the young adults had degrees from Montana State or somewhere. They had flying in airplanes into their farms, you know, and I didn't find any rural people in Montana. Not like we think rural in Alabama. agribusiness.
What was your inspiration for those sermons in those days? I mean, where would you think of getting the topics to speak on?
Well, out of the old head or something I'd read. I think I had a daily devotional book like The Upper Room or something like that. And sometimes you get ideas. I really have no idea how I could have filled up night after night, but then I didn't speak from a manuscript. Well, in fact, I did one day have notes at a little, well, if we're going on about the church business, that when I was 17 and in college, I guess sophomore in college, the North Alabama Conference said they wanted to open up a church at a defense housing project there near the airport. And so I was to go out and be the minister and start the church. I had a local preacher's license. So I went out there, made arrangements for this community building to have the church services in, started visiting around, put up some notices, stuff like that, and we got a church started out there, which later became one of the good churches in the conference as well. Had some great experiences there, but the reason I thought of it was one time a lady got up and said something about these incubator preachers, hatched out of college. Didn't call my name, but they were right there. Coming up with notes to talk from and all like that. Didn't speak when the Spirit, you know, would lead you to speak and all that. But we got through all that. Met some nice people out there. There's one time I had the experience of healing. I guess you'd call it somewhere. This fairly young couple who were real staunch allies out there in getting the church started, she was sick, wasn't there at church Sunday morning. And he asked if I would come home with him and pray for his wife. So of course I did. She's lying in bed. I can remember putting my hands on her head, and it's just something like heat or electricity. And I prayed for her, and she said, "Why?" All right, she got up like Peter's mother-in-law in the scripture and made a fine lunch for us. And she was whatever it was. It was fine. It frightened me really. And I know there were other people who would start that kind of thing, and then, you know, they make, quote, a ministry of it. I shied away from that because I didn't think, you know, for some reason that was the quite thing to do. I just kind of mostly laid it to the idea that she was ready to get up. Anyway, well, there's another place where I didn't have 7 cents for the streetcar usually, so even though I was dressed as best I could and sweaty, when I hit church, I'd run over there and run back. The running was part of it, and I know the old story about after I began to see Dorothy, who lived all the way across town. Sometimes I'd stay too late and miss the last streetcar out of Inslee Highlands. And that'd be another time to run about 7 miles across town to home. So running, I ran all the time when I was younger. After we hit Helena here, I think some of the church people were probably embarrassed. You just don't think about it, you just run anywhere you go. I'd run up to the post office, I'd run to whatever office I was going to visit or whatnot. And when I think of how I must have smelled the underarm. Oh,
I was thinking about, you said you were 17 when you were starting that local church,
Yeah.
and you were still living at home with your parents?
yeah. My parents had moved across near Birmingham Southern. Well, no, I guess not until the next year. Yeah, I was still at home. We were back into Birmingham then,
Okay.
and living in a place called Norwood.
And you went to Birmingham Southern
Went to Birmingham
at
Southern.
the age of 17?
Yeah, I graduated from high school when I was 16, just before my 17th birthday. Yeah. And
So how long were you in college?
I was busy from going on from then. I spent 3 years in college and then found out that I had enough extra credits. They give you credits for doing extra things like playing ball and stuff. And so I went a summer, and then I guess I was 19 or 20 then. And then I went to Duke. So I never did really graduate from grade school because they didn't have any graduation. High school is the only place I ever graduated from that I was there.
And so when you went on to Duke, how long were you at Duke?
1 year. And then I was the president of the National Conference of Methodist Youth at the time. And we had a meeting in a National Conference meeting in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Youth Convocation and National Conference meeting. And we had some projects going because the young people in those days thought we ought to be doing things. This is back during the war. We thought we ought to have some kind of a way of helping Japanese Americans who were able to get out, and if they had some place, some home that they could stay in, the father could till he could find a work, and then bring his family out. So we established 2 or 3 hostels along the West Coast. We just took up money ourselves. Kids pledged their own, or young people pledged their own money, and we got people to do it. And so I'm talking to 3 or 4 of the other boys who were on the council, their youth council, and one of them was going to go to Garrett in the fall, and that's in Evanston, Illinois. And we thought that'd be a good central location to work out of if all of us would go there. But they said 2 of them were getting married, and they said, without being married, we're not letting you come to join us. So I said, all right. I had seen Dorothy just start up the sidewalk, and I said, the next girl that comes past that bush, I'll ask her if she wants to get married. Yeah. Dorothy came around the bush, and I said, honey, you want to get married? I knew both of us were really to the point where we knew that we were the only ones for each other. And she said, sure, big boy. So I said, wait a minute, I'll go check this. So I went down, and she was in earnest, and so was I. So the next day after the thing ended, we were on a bus coming back to Birmingham, Alabama. By the time we got to Nashville, by the way, we couldn't even, that night, the bus was crowded, and she got a seat, but I couldn't. I was standing up in the back. And even so, when we got off the bus in Nashville, the bus driver said, so long, you lovebirds. It showed. We had a layover of about an hour, and the bus station was right by a place called Sam's Small Jewelry. And we went in there, and I bought a ring for her for about, I don't know, $5 or so, and she spent about $12 for this ring that I have. And we went on home. Of course, her folks, my folks, had no idea about such a thing. When she got home, she announced that she was going to be married. And we had decided that we'd be married the next Saturday. Meanwhile, I stayed on the bus to go down to Evergreen, Alabama, where my folks were then living, and also preach a revival meeting there for a week, and I made $100. So, plus the fact that I'll never forget one of my young friends from college was now the coach of the high school football team. And he got me out there one day and got me all dressed out. And he said, "Now boys," he said, "we're going to run that off tackle play, and I want George to be here and show you how to stop that play." And he had these big galunking country kids running over me all afternoon. He thought that was a good thing as well. He was a young man who, by the way, stopped a lynch mob by driving his car in front of the bunch and letting the sheriff get away with a black boy into another town. Well, anyway, got home on Saturday morning, I guess it was, and Saturday night we got married in the end of the Highland Church. Spent the night in Birmingham, and the next day we got on an airplane, American Airlines, and went to Chicago. Didn't have any money left then. Boy, we found a little upstairs place, and the lady who owned the place and who was renting the upstairs room to us came up with a bowl of fruit. Dorothy will never forget this. And under the fruit was an old-fashioned book on sex and marriage. Dorothy could tell you the name of the book. I've forgotten it. Well, then we had our days at Garrett. Dorothy got a job, assistant professor in one of the speech classes at Northwestern. And she got a job writing scripts for religious radio. And was part of a little dance group that was in the first broadcast TV stuff in Chicago. Which was good because I wasn't making any money much. I got an appointment to Stockton and Pleasant Hill, Stockton, Illinois, and Pleasant Hill, Indiana, just across the line, 120 miles south of Chicago. And we'd go down there every weekend. Got an old car. That old car cost us about $40 more than the salary they paid for my going down there that year. But we got some good meals from there. We almost froze to death, literally.
Oh, hang on a second. We're running out of tape here. I don't want to miss this.
Right.